You're allowing everybody, Anjali? Let's get all in.
Shall I? Okay, let's do that.
Yep, let's do that.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see you here. We will start in about a minute. Good evening, everyone. Good to have you here. We are going to start in about a minute. 6:33 is when we start. All right. Good evening and welcome on this amazing spring evening. It's really wonderful to see you here. As we step into 2023, we're looking forward to a wonderful year away from all the stuff we've gone through in the last few years, literally coming back to a new world. This month also happens to be the International Women's Day month. So what better month to restart birthright conversations in 2023? Devoted to celebrating the achievements of women and seeking gender equality, this month focuses on a lot of conversation. I'm pretty sure a lot's been happening around you, and you're reading a lot about what are organizations doing to make Women's Day and gender equity a conversation, or maybe more than a conversation. The campaign theme this year is Embrace Equity, while United Nations theme is Digital, Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality. In September 2022, and this is a bit of a trivia for you, UN published a report which called Progress on Sustainable Development Goals, the Gender Snapshot 2022. It found women's exclusion from the digital world had come to a loss at $1 trillion. I'll repeat that, $1 trillion from the GDP of low and middle income countries in the past 10 years. And without action, it is predicted that this loss will grow to $1.5 trillion by 2025. This is just one simple trivia, or not so simple after all. Today, we want to delve deeper, really understand what's going on. The conversation is about getting ideas. On one hand, the progressive organizations out there are creating equitable opportunities, building gender equity. On the other hand, numbers speak differently. So what's the real gap? What are we missing? Today's conversation is not about individuals or experiences, but it's really about sharing and ideating. So we invite you to be here with an open mind and take ideas that'll work for you, as they have worked for the panelists here. And hence, our panel today is all men panel, and it's purely on purpose. These men today are not only proud partners, enabling fathers, but also very inclusive leaders. So without much ado, I'm going to introduce our first panelist to you, Ankur Gupta. 23 years of experience in banking and financial services. Currently, Ankur is a director within Asia Pacific Transaction Banking sales team at the Bank of America based in Singapore. Almost late night for him. Passionate about DEI, and as the chairperson for D&I committee for his line of business in Asia, Ankur has championed several initiatives around cultural diversity and gender diversity. He's also the chair of the network that aims to help people with disabilities, helping them with employment opportunities. His committee's work has been widely appreciated and received recognition and awards externally. Ankur is the recipient of the Global Diversity and Inclusion Award for his organization for the year 2022. Welcome to our panel, Ankur.
Thank you so much, Anjali. That was quite a flattering introduction. Not sure I deserve that much, but thank you.
Of course you do. And that's why you're here. And here's my first question for you, Ankur. Women's Day special, all men panel. As a chair of D&I initiatives, in your observation, what is changing? What is really working in gender equity and equality?
Really depends on whose lens you're seeing it from. But if you see it from my lens, what the kind of organizations that I've worked for, the kind of geographies that I have lived in, I would say a lot is changing, right? Have we gotten to that ideal stage? Probably not. A lot needs to be done. But I think sticking to your question, what's changing, what's changed, a lot is really beginning to change. First and foremost, any change starts with conversation. As we all know, this is probably one of the most important conversations in the last couple of years, right? Gender equality, equity, these are really, really important conversations to be had. So clearly there's a lot more conversations happening. And therefore, as a result of that, there's much more awareness on this topic, right? And because we're talking so much about it, there's so much more receptivity across organizations, across different levels within organizations. And as a result of all of that, there are many initiatives that each of the organizations, or at least the organizations that I've had the privilege of working for, are sort of indulging in. So you see, there's a lot of seriousness that I feel that's being attached to this topic now. They're not a general check the box sort of conversation anymore. Management is increasingly being judged on the initiatives that they're taking, whether or not they're incorporating DEI in their regular practices, in their evaluation criteria, in their hiring matrices, in their performance evaluations, in their promotion criteria, compensation. It's all being taken care of, at least the way I see it in the organizations that I'm privy to. As we know, the narrative is now changing more and more from equality to equity, right? Which means that we are recognizing some of the responsibilities that women have to undertake, and making sure that not only are we giving them equal treatment, that we're making the level field equitable for all of them. Not to forget, there's an equal number of men that are participating in this and supporting these causes for women, because we genuinely believe that it is the right thing to do. Exchange of information, right? I think the organizations that I've worked and the kind of culture that I've been brought up in, but I think conversations like these on a much wider platform, where there's people coming across from various industries, or their participants from various geographies and various industries, that's pretty helpful too, because that helps us to understand and exchange information across people and industries, right? So what I might be seeing, somebody might be able to take that back and incorporate it into their organization, and vice versa, right? So all of these things are really, really helpful. And I think that is really the change that I am seeing that's happening. So in summary, is change happening? Absolutely. I think change is happening. There's certainly an honest recognition of the fact that women are, in the very least, equal partners, right, in everything that we do. We believe that it is important to bring, the best of talent, irrespective of one's race or gender, or, as you mentioned, I do a lot in the disability space as well. So really, it all just boils down at the end of the day to meritocracy. And we need to just make sure that that meritocracy is recognized across genders, and not just being specific and only about men. That's when we talk about organizations, right? But you take a step back and you peel the onion a little more, then you go down to see that has to just go beyond organizations into society as well, right? There are many societies and many cultures in which maybe women are not being encouraged. But when we talk to such people and we show them examples of what women have been achieving, not only are capable, but have demonstrated that they can achieve, right? That changes the whole paradigm, right? When parents and, when they start seeing what their daughters are capable of achieving and what other daughters have sort of achieved, I think it just opens up the whole thing in terms of whether women are capable of achieving what men have been, and clearly they are, right? There's absolutely no doubt about that. I'll pause to see if you have any question on that.
I think, Ankur, you've touched on some really key points here, right? Skill and knowledge versus gender, That's now the hiring is happening. And I've been in the hiring industry for long enough to know and heard all kinds of requests. We want a man for this job, we want a woman for this job. All that narrative is slowly changing. And thank God for that, because we are now focusing on skill and we're focusing on knowledge. Also, the fact that there are women leading by example, and there are a few in our audience today, and who are leading by example, is changing the narrative, the way is being seen. I remember I've stated this example more than once. I remember when I was joining hospitality, I was told it's not for women. So I had to stand against a million people to say, but I would like to do this. And today I see more and more women getting into hospitality. So I think you're absolutely right. Because we are communicating so much, we're making so much noise, the narrative is changing. So I'm going to quickly move to our next panelist, because this is a very interesting link that you've drawn for us. And I'm going to ask our next panelist a very important question. But before that, of course, we need to introduce him to all our viewers. Our next panelist, Lokesh Taneja, Head of Digital Portfolio Global Resource Management at the Ericsson AB. Lokesh has 18 years of working experience as a professional in telecom industry. Based in Sweden, Lokesh is known for driving major transformations globally in resource management. As a young achiever, Lokesh was picked by his company in the Rapid High Potential Global Talent Pool, which is phenomenal. Lokesh is also the ambassador with One Young World, works with a number of organizations globally driving social concerns. Apart from this, Lokesh is an advocate of diversity and the information technology and telecom space. There's a quote that Lokesh really wants to, talks about all the time, and I'm going to quote that. Culture is not an initiative. Culture is an enabler of initiatives. No culture can live if it attempts to be exclusive. What an apt quote for this conversation today, Lokesh. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Anjali. It's such kind words for me. Thank you. Well, I think when I look at things in a broader perspective, and then also me coming from a tech background, I think there's a lot of statistics that kind of go around. And let's start with some statistical figures and understand. And this is also important for us to understand, because there's always a legacy that we all drive from, and we kind of carry that into anywhere, right? If you go back to about 2000, 1999 or 2000, we almost had about 19 to 20% women participating in Bachelor of Sciences kind of degrees, or Master of Sciences kind of degrees. And there were just 11% of all engineers were women. Now, we come from that kind of statistics or that kind of position. Now, what's happening today? Globally, women make up to about 24 to 25% of STEM workforce. And let me tell you, it is actually around 8% in 1970s. And then in 1990, it kind of started to stem up. And today it might look like to be about, when you're looking at a science professionals workforce, it might be about 40%. So clearly things are moving. There's a lot of progress that we have done in the area of putting women first, empowering women, getting them to the science and technology area, or getting them somewhere else. Very recently, there was this Forbes publication that came out, and the Fortune.com also published. In Jan 2023 alone, we had 5 new women CEOs taking over as CEO positions on the 1st of Jan for among the 500 Fortune companies. That actually led to the total number of women to about 53 now, which makes about 10% of women CEOs in the world for Fortune 500 companies. And interestingly, there is about 19 to 20% representation of women in senior tech sectors or senior positions in tech sectors like vice president positions, and about 15 to 20 again on CEO positions as well. So these numbers are clearly speaking that things are moving. Women in tech are on the rise, or women across the globe are on the rise. There's definitely something that's working, right? The equitable hiring, as we call it, is actually on the rise. And there's a lot of, this is all backed up by a lot of initiatives within organizations that are kind of taken up. I mean, maybe those challenges that we've all heard about, lack of mentorship that women felt, women role models were not around, uh, opportunities, lack of opportunities. Ankur was really rightly touching upon the equal compensation part, skill-based compensation. But there's something that people are not talking about pretty much, and that's not to do with corporates, actually, or that's not to do with the corporate sector. It's about the ecosystem that we all live in, or the women live in. And I think that's the touch point. So what needs to be done by corporates? It's being done in different frameworks, formal framework, guidelines, whatever you may call them, right? But let me interestingly bring up certain statistics of what happens in Sweden, or what happened in Sweden. And this will be super interesting because I come from Sweden and I have a privy to some things that happen here. Until 1974, only 17% of the Swedish men took something that was called as parental leaves. Now that was a big concern, and then the social system here kind of started to talk about, and the government came back with certain policy changes. And then what happened in 1974 was the need of gender equality that came up as a goal for policy making. And there were certain parental leave mandates that kind of came out. And these were typically led to higher or to increase the gender equality in labor market participation, interestingly, not just about the equality of the other part. The result was that the percentage of women in labor market participation went up from 50% to 80% over a period of 3 decades. Just a change in the social ecosystem. And I think that's what, to me, is kind of the base. We can rely on corporates. The corporates are making a lot of things to change. They're bringing in frameworks, guidelines, they're trying to curb the challenges, doing everything. But I think the pivoting point would actually come with a social change. So we need to think beyond the borders of organization, beyond these numbers. We need to actually start taking a look and have women empowerment be driven as a collective social responsibility now, and help evolve our society and culture and the mindset, basically, to be able to say equal contribution from the men side to empower women to have a support to stretch themselves in this arena. And I think there, it's the policy making, it's the culture, it's the mindset, it's the whole ecosystem that has to come together. Let's not just talk about corporates here. I think that's the view that I bring from what I have been looking at.
And you have a point. It's a very strong point. Collective social responsibility. I love that phrase. I think we can, as organizations, can do a lot, but if people don't show up when they need to show up because of limitations back home in their social environment, or what is being fed here as we are growing up as women, then how will we show up? And to add to that statistics, there is the not so good statistics, which is 42% of the women leaders left the tech industry in the last year. And why? And that's where this collective social responsibility bit comes in. So thank you for sharing that very important aspect for today's conversation. So far, we are in a space where we are exploring this, and I'm going to move to a labor intensive industry and bring in our third panelist, which is where numbers of people are more, but how are we doing with women empowerment? So welcoming Arjun Kagalu, our third panelist today. Arjun is the general manager at the Novotel Calcutta Hotel and Residences, the largest eco hotel in Eastern India. With 17 years of hospitality experience, Arjun has worked with brands like Hyatt, Taj, and Marriott across 3 continents. Swiss-bred hotelier and refined by Colonel, Arjun advocates people are organization's biggest asset, aren't they? Arjun believes that hospitality can have a lot more women leadership and is constantly looking for ways to enable and innovate. Arjun takes a lot of inspiration from running and lives by the quote from John Bingham: the only magic in our lives as runners is the magic of consistency. Not every run will make you feel great, He says that focus only on the process, wait for the outcome. Arjun, thank you for joining us from New Delhi at the minute, but from Calcutta. And I would want to quickly put a question across to you. You've been hearing social responsibility. You've been hearing some great numbers that Lokesh brought in. Also what Ankur said in terms of skill knowledge, in terms of merit, in terms of mindset change. The interesting question that's coming to my mind, Arjun, is women in real leadership. This is not a new problem. We've heard of it forever. Why are so few women in leadership positions, especially in hospitality? Even after so many years of spotlight and so many efforts that are being made, so many programs that organizations are running. What do you think is happening?
Good evening, everybody. Firstly, it's indeed a pleasure to be on this panel. Like I said, everybody touched upon, Ankur and Lokesh gave some great insights. And what I really love about is how gender equality has now become progress to gender equity, right? Anjani rightly started by stating that this is a panel of all men, but what she missed is directed, orchestrated by women, right? So Anjani is actually doing this. So that's change is already happening. And coming straight to the question, right? Women in real leadership. There were many examples in the past as well. Statistics shows something else. Was there a problem? Yes. The number can be better. Definitely, yes. The number can be better. What exactly happened was back to basics. What gets measured gets done. Right now, what all the organizations are on one aspect, we need to increase the women leadership across the portfolio. Now we're working towards the percentage of, I'm not naming the company, but we have goals from 15% to 35% of your total workforce, particularly in the leadership positions, to be women. Now, what are we doing about it? So coming back to what Ankur has rightly touched upon is equity, right? Simple difference, everybody knows. Equality is about giving opportunities, same opportunities to a group of people or a single person to achieve an outcome, right? But equity talks about, we customize it, right? There's no one size fits all. I would like to give an example of the hotel brand since I come from this. Earlier used to be the days where used to have one hotel meant for luxury travel. But right now you see the company, we have hotels which have 30, 40 brands. And I have a luxury travel, I have a particular brand that goes for it. One size doesn't fit all at all. Now with the statistics, what the numbers have done to the hotels is, as a person managing a hotel, my goal is also to have X percentage of women leadership. So how do I do it? Equity comes into place. I cannot say that I have equal opportunities, you come and do interviews open for everybody. But no, there is a flexibility that allows. I know one of the audience right now on this forum who has actually started that by stating that work from home can be a possibility for women, right? We do have options of variable shifts, flexible work schedule. This can be done. And I think Lokesh rightly mentioned, when we see this happening, the pride factor the parents get, what the daughters or what others' daughters can achieve of, gives the biggest motivation factor. And I've seen this real life in our hotels day in, day out. We are talking about this right now. I have an example without naming the person. 10 years ago, I have a women leader who's also happened to be one of my mentors, successfully balanced 2 kids. This is way back in 2008-9 when women, diversity, equity, equality was not that much of a thing. But the fact she mentioned to me that one of her general managers gave her an option. She wanted to quit the industry because she's unable to manage 2 kids and she's unable to operate it, long working hours, hotels, it's very difficult. But the then general manager actually said that no problem, we will have a creche option available for you at the hotel. You can do a part-time flexible schedule for you. You can make things happen. And she did. And not only she succeeded, she actually became a role model for many women workforce in the industry and even till today. Right. So what has changed from then to now is now we started actually putting a measurable goal for the leaders in the top positions. And I feel diversity is a powerful driver of collective performance, right? It is very, very important to involve men, women, and managers at the highest level to set an example, right? Promoting gender diversity is everyone's duty, regardless of the gender. We cannot do this alone, and we need men to actually support, and we need everybody to understand, empathize Otherwise, equity become statistics, obviously. Like I said, somebody asks me, why do you think there are not many women leadership in hospitality? I said, yes. Lokesh also rightly said, we are making progress, but are we there yet? No. Can this be better? Certainly. What can be done? There are so many things we are doing right now. Ankur rightly pointed out, something we are doing right, and the change is visible, right? Like I said, we see the panel right now is orchestrated by you, right? We feel happy. And I see that, and there are so many people actually take an active interest, and we know what's happening. We see things happening around, and we also want the daughters to go back and get the same amount of opportunities, equal chances, equal opportunities for everybody, irrespective of the gender. They should be able to do it. And I quote Sadhguru here because he very rightly says that earlier used to be jobs are specific to the muscle part. Right now, it doesn't matter. It's purely skill-based. With the touch of a button, I can actually move 2 tons of stuff. That women can do that. I can do that. Otherwise, in ports, only men were employed purely because it's a labor work. You need muscle power to build that. That's not happening anymore, right? With the touch of a button, anybody can do, right? So that's the progress right now. And yes, we can be better, definitely. But there is certainly, we have come a long way. And I see a light at the end of the tunnel for sure.
Thank you, Arjun. What a pertinent point. Pride factor, collective performance. Not only men, but women are responsible as well to bring in equity. And the third most important point, which really touched me, was flexibility of work. And I think everyone's talking about it. And this is nothing to do with work from home alone, but how can I make work flexible and customize it? One size doesn't fit all. Fantastic. Yeah. So far, we've discussed some very interesting things, skill and knowledge. We've discussed, we are moving slowly, but we are moving steadily, consistently. We've spoken about, that there is a belief out there that we are talking, there's communication, so we are creating awareness. We've spoken about collective social responsibility, but also collective performance. And these are 2 very key points to be taken back. Pride factor, equity. So Ankur, a question for you from here. And this is something that I've been itching to ask for a while. What can men do to sponsor more diverse candidates? What can be done differently in your or any industry?
Firstly, I want to say I've been making a lot of notes based on what the other panelists have been talking about, because I really want to take some of those things back to my organization as well, right? So fantastic. Thank you for that. Back to your question. First and foremost, I think there has to be an active acknowledgement of the fact that despite all of these collective efforts, as on date, there is a gap, and therefore more needs to be done, right? So that's one, right? B, as I said earlier, I think we need to understand why that gap exists, right? So yeah, there's the McKinsey report that talks about, the statistics and the numbers, and why there's more women at relatively junior levels, but they drop off at senior levels. We need to make the effort to understand why that is happening in our respective organizations, right? And I think we then need to advocate for the women that we work with. So, I mean, personally speaking, I work very closely with some of the female junior talent in my organization to understand how they think about their career goals, what they think is working for them and what's not working for them, right? So we need to have well-defined, actionable development goals for each employee for sure, but we need to, and again, I want to touch on the equity part of it, we need to understand what are some of the unique challenges or responsibilities that women or a specific woman might have as compared to, the wider cohort, right? Examples of these being, I personally know friends who've got like young children working in a global organization. Sometimes we all know, I mean, late night calls or very early morning calls is now a natural phenomena, right? May not be possible for everyone to do that, right? It's possible for me to do it, and I do it very often, but that doesn't mean that another colleague of mine who's sort of got a small baby can do it. Maybe not, right? So equal opportunity, sure, we both invited to the meeting, but she cannot do it, right? So we got to understand some of those things, right? And I really think, given the fact that at the end of the day, we all have ladies who are professionals in our own families, we've got to say, okay, what is the extra incremental responsibilities that we can do to support them, right? So I think, as I said, acknowledgement, we need to have well-defined development plans which are along the lines of equity and not just equality. A lot more flexibility, right? Because the same McKinsey report that was being referred to some time back, right? So, and even from what we've noticed, we, at least in the organizations that I've worked with, we see an equal representation from men and women, right? When we hire off campus, there's actually no disparity. I mean, it's meritocracy all the way. And whilst we do that, it just ends up being equal representation from men and women. But somehow down the line, as people are getting promoted, and especially if you come to the senior most rungs, there is no doubt that in most organizations, I would say, that ratio changes somewhat. So why is that happening? We need to understand that, right? And then we need to change the organization culture to make sure that we are retaining this bright talent, right? We cannot afford to lose this bright talent, right? So I think it was, someone touched upon flexible hours. I think that's really a blessing in disguise. I mean, while I might like to go to office every day because I find that convenient, but that doesn't mean everybody can, right? So I think we need to understand some of that. How can we make the office space in a manner that's conducive, for some of the women, right? Do we have a nursing room? Do we have, those sort of facilities that women might need? So at the end of the day, what I understand is the organization culture. I mean, you can hire an equal number of women, but it's the organization culture that will eventually define whether the female talent chooses to stick on with that organization or moves to where they feel is more conducive to their work style, right? Or their needs. And therefore, at the end of the day, the shareholders just gonna look at, are we meeting our targets? Are we meeting our numbers? And if we are losing some of our really good talent, that's really going to be a big challenge for us. So I think men just need to make sure that we're advocating ourselves to make sure that the requirements of women in our respective organizations and in our respective societies, in our respective homes, are actually being catered to and making that environment conducive for them. And I think we are doing that to a very large extent.
I think making environment conducive is like, it's like the thing to do. And if you read books by CEOs like Indra Nui and Lena Nair, and they've talked about this in a in a very candid manner, and have constantly said that if I wasn't enabled the way I was, if there wasn't enough equity in my workplace and at home, I wouldn't have been able to do what I was able to do. So I think there's a lot that sits on organizational culture, very well pointed out, Ankur. And that organizational culture, how flexible and adaptable and accepting is it?
No, absolutely. And if I may just add, a couple of sentences more to what I was saying, I think even in terms of our performance evaluation, right? I think sometimes and in certain situations, there has to be a more equitable way of measuring performance as well. I think one of the conversations that I was having with a lady colleague who had gone on maternity leave and come back to work after 6 months said, "Oh, well, I don't think I stand a chance for promotion this year because I took 6 months off." And I was like, that just doesn't sound correct to me, right? Because promotions are not just based on what you've delivered to the organization, but also a function of the talent, what your potential is, what you're capable of bringing to the table, right? And just because that lady decided to take 6 months off maternity, that doesn't take away from her potential, right? Or what she's delivered over a significant period of time. So I just find I just feel organizations need to be a little more flexible and need to perhaps change the way they think when they really evaluate ladies, the female talent, from their career progression perspective as well.
Fantastic. Such an important point. I think going one step back as well in it, Ankur, as an HR, when I was in HR and as an HR person, am I really communicating this to within the organization? Am I creating a culture which tells that there's equity in different formats and that you will not be measured because you were not here for 6 months, but you will be measured for your potential and for what you delivered in the other 6 months. And so I think there's also, it's two ways, right? So the woman in this context should believe that she is capable. So there's a belief and there's a whole internal barrier that needs to be broken. There's a whole conversation on that. But then there's also the conversation with the organization. Is the organization telling you that you are there in the running race, even though you took 6 months off? And I have that example here very much, but it was a man who took 6 months off and went back to work and got a promotion, very much on the panel. And he's smiling right now. I'm going to come to him in a minute. But before that, I'm going to go to Arjun. And Arjun, this entire conversation is creating a lot of scintillating thoughts in my mind in terms of how organizations can make a difference. What is it that we need to do? What is it? How can a coaching company like us even support this whole move? But in your mind, what are those common blind spots that leaders and teams get stuck with when trying to create equitable team?
Some great points by Ankur. Firstly, it's actually indeed very, very heartening to actually hear that. So coming to a question on the blind spots, there's actually a mythology around leaders, right? That they're visionary, they're inspirational, they seem to know what organizations and teams know intuitively, right? But make no mistake, no one is perfect, right? We also have, all leaders have the blind spots. And I'll name two very common blind spots we all encounter. And I personally also have experienced is overestimating the strategic ability. That's one of the most common blind spot I come across. And I've personally also experienced in my career, right? People in the leadership positions, we often think that we are more strategic than we really are. We also rise through the positions commercially, operationally, and we find that we are also responsible for thinking about markets, competition, driving the growth, company in a broader picture. But the shift in thinking from solving the operational challenges, then thinking about the big picture of changing the direction for the company is a sizable one. And we tend to overestimate this. And we all have done it at certain point in our careers. And I've personally done it too. And then by the time before I realize that this is my inability, I've already lost in the weeds of operational problem solving without providing the strategic guidance of taking the company forward and things like that, right? This is one of the most common blind spots, I feel. And the second one is communicating ineffectively. And this also is an assumption again, because what we always think that I normally think that I have communicated my organization goals to my leadership team very, very well. And I have given them 3 points, and this is the objectives we have, this is what we are directing towards, and this is what we do. But if I actually have to go back and say that, is this communicated effectively to everybody down the line? If I actually have somebody go back and ask the question and say that, hey, these are the company objectives, are you in sync with that? Not just the executive committee members who report into you directly, but if you go to the rank and file associates of the team down the line and ask that, these are your company objectives, are you aware of it? Most of the times the answer is no, or maybe some of the times they say that, yes, I know, but not very sure, or this is what I'm thinking, but it becomes a Chinese whisper sometimes, right? So what we think that, like the first time, right, we overestimate our strategic ability, and second is we think we are communicating effectively, but we are actually not, right? But we know awareness doesn't always mean elimination. What we need, like you rightly said, that's when we actually take help of coaches. That's when we be in the right company where you are able to listen, understand, and actually gauge what they're actually saying. Whether we know that just because we know that we have blind spot, that doesn't necessarily mean that I've already fixed it. So I know my blind spot is strategic abilities. I know my blind spot is not communicating effectively. But just because I know my blind spot, does it equate to I fix them? No, absolutely not. What do I have to do is actually have to go back, take counseling, take help, go to the coaches, go to a third person. There are many tools right now. In fact, hotels are also using communicating feedback tools like 360-degree feedback, which is actually an eye-opener. I was surprised 3 years ago when I've actually taken the 360 feedback. That actually is an eye-opener for me. I feel that, oh, I feel everybody thinks about me like this. But when I actually read the report, you feel, oh, do people think also like this? Oh, this is also my area of interest. It's actually an eye-opener, because till then I was under the assumption that everything is well and I am the best communicator. I maintain transparency. I communicate very clearly. I convey the objectives of the company to the team very clearly. But when I read the 360 feedback report, They see sometimes there's a lot of jargon, sometimes it's very complex, maybe use a simpler language. So this is when we actually have to come back and say that I identified my blind spots. What do I do about this? And I think Lokesh also rightly mentioned that we go back and ask questions to these team members and say, what is working well for you? What is not? Right? If it is working well, we'll work on it. We'll continue to improve. If it is not working well, what can we do actually to make things better for you? So I think that's what I personally feel. These are the blind spots.
I completely agree with you. Overestimating strategic capability. This is such a common blind
Yes.
spot we all face. And so hence, not being able to say that my strategy in the company is to create equity, and here's the 5 things I would like to do to create an environment which is equitable for all genders and all diversities, is almost saying that I'm not there. And same for communication. They're so linked, right? The strategic ability and
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I have a comment here where says that in UK, some of the companies give combined maternity and paternity leave to families who can choose how much maternity and how much paternity leave you can take. And that's so brilliant. I wish a lot more organizations were thinking like that. But before I go for my next question, I have a question for the audience. And this is something that we do in every Forthright conversation. So I'm going to put it out there. And the question is, when was the last time you did something that was equitable for people around you? When was the last time you did something that was equitable for people around you? Leave your message in the chat box rather quickly and before we move on to our next question to Lokesh. And as people are typing in, I'm going to move to Lokesh very quickly in the interest of time. And Lokesh, you had said, and Arjun had said, both of you had in your form said somewhere about, communities, about collective performance, about collective social responsibility in making organizations more equitable. So the question for you is, what is the role of each member of the team in making an organization embrace gender equity?
I think, firstly, we got to look at, one is gender equality that you're kind of driving, and then you want to bring equity from equality. But at the larger outset, this is all connected to diversity. And it has rightly is already pointed out and is talked so much that diversity is a larger word to talk about. And then diversity and embracing diversity is more directed towards a cultural stuff to be brought in, or a cultural mindset to be developed within an organization or within a team. And I think there are very fundamental, this goes back to kind of some of the fundamental key aspects of a leadership and how do you want to run a team. And they couple in quite well, basically with what you should or what you're expecting out of a team. Unfortunately or fortunately, in some places it's done, some places it is not. But when we want to drive, and I'm going to take the cue from Arjun, what he said was collective performance. But I think also, and we've seen it in a lot of exercises we've done in practicality and what I've been implementing or where we've been focusing, that diversity truly actually drives collective intelligence in an organization. And it's like a superlative form of what Arjun was saying is performance. And the fundamentals kind of go back and remain same. You gotta start a conversation within your team. Cultivate a speak up culture. Do not let anybody be on the side. If you've got a diverse system, you shouldn't be, whether it's a female or you've got a diversity in terms of age, you have to take everybody along. And that starts from a speak up culture. Do not let anybody be left behind. Value each one. And that is where it goes to have a meritocratic spotlight in your team. Do not have it's said what is called as unconscious bias. Get away from that unconscious bias piece. Cultivate an inclusive leadership. And when I say inclusive leadership, it's not just the leader of a team, but sometimes your team members are leaders in themselves. They're driving pieces. So you gotta help them act both with integrity and inclusive thought process in making decisions or in driving the ways of working. And finally, I believe it's a continuous work towards bringing the opportunity as well as removing these biases that go around within your team, and that will come from right decision making, I think. So this is what you got to expect from a team which is going to be diverse in its ways, and you want to drive them towards a collective intelligence. So yeah, my submissions there. Yes.
Collective intelligence. I'm loving the 3 steps at which we worked. We started off with skill and knowledge. We went into social responsibility. We went into performance. And now we've gone into intelligence, collective intelligence, intelligently driving the whole process through by removing unconscious biases, by creating a culture of communication, by knowing your blind spots, which come in strategically as well. And we've all been through it at some point in our lives. I think the question is a little hard for everyone to answer, so I'm going to simplify it. I just want you to do a reflection. This is a coaching conversation. We are a coaching company, so our aim is often to raise a coaching question. So this is a reflection question for you, or the audience here. And the question is simple. When you're thinking of equity, what are you thinking? What is your view? And this can be simple words, flexibility. This could be doing things together at home. This could be, sharing workload. This could be anything. What are you thinking when you're thinking of equity? Or equality, if that comes easier for you. And that's something that we're looking for in terms of a coaching question. But we've been collecting a lot of wonderful nuggets in this conversation. So as we're coming closer to the 45-minute mark or the 50-minute mark of this conversation, I want to really run through a very important series, a question for all of you panelists here. And I'm going to start with Lokesh. This one is a really candid question, Lokesh. Will having more women at the top make men leaders dispensable?
Not really. I think it's having more women leaders is going to create more opportunities for men. And I always keep going the other way around to say, somebody said, why do we have 15% women in science? I asked something else, which is, why do you have such low participation of men in art streams? I mean, turn it around. I think it's just that we are not accepting, or we are just having, you may call it blind spots, or you may call it the other way, but I think just turn the table. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity for men from all perspectives to have a women on the top. That will bring a lot of balance to work and life. That will become a lot of emotional portion towards what we drive. That's a new sense of business. So I think I don't think I support, and I would rather want to have more women leaders on the top and see opportunities grow for men. But it's definitely a very personal comment. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And these are personal comments. These are personal conversations. We are talking as we individuals. But balance of work life, I think you've just touched it. Really, if I have enough men and women in my team, I will know how to balance. I will know how to multitask a lot better. I will know that I need to get home because even I have a child waiting, whether I'm a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. Correct. So well brought up. Thank you very much for that, Lokesh. I'm going actually with the same question, this time to Ankur. Ankur, will having more women at the top make men leaders dispensable?
Look, I think if anyone has this thought process, it would be very, very bizarre. And I'm sorry to say that. I say this because it's not like we're trying to replace one gender with another gender, right? That's not what we're trying to do over here, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, what we want to make sure is that there is the right, firstly, everyone has equal opportunity and there is the right amount of competition because at the end of the day, it's all about meritocracy, right? But it would not be meritocratic if there was only, if the participation was largely only from one gender, right? So it's got to be an equal and equitable opportunity for all, right? I don't think we are this, I mean, it'd be highly, if we think we survive because there is one gender that's being kept out, that isn't that crab mentality where you like stay on top by pushing others down? I mean, that's not, I think, the idea here. And then why look at it from a gender basis? I mean, if in my industry they induce another 100,000 men, wouldn't that also increase competition, right? So I think if we really want to be relevant, we've just got to keep working hard, upskill, reskill, just make sure we're on top of our game. And so I don't think it's a battle between two genders. We just got to make sure we have the best person for the job at any given point in time, and then make sure we keep working hard so we are the right person for that job. And it's as simple as that.
It is not a battle between the two genders. And that is what we are trying to say through this panel, that we are not here to say who's better. We're just here to say, which is a skill that you need to hire? What is the knowledge base you need to get in? And how can we enable everyone out here to bring that in so that there is success for people and for organizations? So absolutely. Thank you very much, Ankur. That's spot on. Arjun, coming to you with the same question, and I'm going to repeat the question. Will having more women at the top make men leaders dispensable?
Absolutely not. I think I completely agree with Lokesh and Ankur. And I reiterate what I have said in the beginning, right? Diversity is a powerful driver of collective performance, right? And it's not about men versus women. We got to work together. And if I have to go back and give a real life example of what we do, right? I can't say that since my better half, my wife controls everything at home, she runs the house, will it make her any superior? Will it make me any inferior? No, it's absolutely not. We cannot do this without each other, right? It is collective responsibility. And that's why I keep saying the same, that without what she's doing at home, without how she's looking after my daughter, without how she's running my house, I would not be able to do what I'm doing outside, and vice versa. It's the same. So there is absolutely no superior, inferior here. And them being at top absolutely doesn't make men indispensable. And it's rightly, like Ankur rightly said, it's not battle between both the genders. And it's the collective performance. We need men to support women. We need women to support men. And irrespective of the genders, it's everybody's collective responsibility. And I think that's what, I think the panel also today very rightly spoke about, how equality versus equity, right? 10 years ago, Women's Day, we used to talk only about gender equality. Right now, the theme of this year's International Women's Day is also equity. And that's how the progress has been made. And that's lovely. Like I said, there's light at the end of the tunnel. There is a lot of good things happening, albeit at a slow pace, but there is progress. Slow, but steady. And I'm sure we will progress faster with the times to come.
And I read this very interesting thing today, which is called the Lindy effect. If you're consistent with something, it's going to change. It's bound to change.
Oh, absolutely.
So thank you for mentioning the consistency. There was a question that came up earlier by Vic Sabs, which said, how do we replicate the boys network? And I'll just go to Ankur with this question. Ankur, how do we replicate the boys network where a lot of deals in career progress gets done? How do we replicate that for women?
That's a tough one. In the sense that, honestly, I don't think I'm a part of any boys network. Now I'm scratching my head over here, right? So when I think nobody underestimates the power of networking. We all really understand that, right? So when I look at my circle of network, who are people that I need to influence, who are people that are important for my career, do I reach out to, do I have a network that comprises men only? No, I don't think so. There's equally important ladies in my organization as are men, and I make sure I treat them all equal. And so, I don't know, I'm not exactly familiar with, I am aware of such networks. I've not been a part of one. But I think clearly, I mean, I feel the times are changing, and I think if there are such networks, which I'm sure there are, that in today's environment, it would be much more acceptable to have women be a part of those groups or clubs or whatever you want to call it than may have been in the past. That's all I can say. Personally, I would be, if I was ever in such a club, I'd be more than happy to have, a diverse sort of cohort, because that's really what makes even conversations more interesting.
And you brought that out interestingly. I'm a part of a women's network. There are entrepreneurs, coaches, counselors, therapists. There are 400 of them. We meet pretty much every 2 months, and we give each other a lot of business, and we uplift each other. And if there's a question that is asked in that group, it's quickly and promptly answered. I don't know half of them. So, and we have an acronym, be open yet secure.
Yet secure.
So I think that's a good one. So thank you for sharing that. There's another question that came in directly, and this one I'm going to actually take to Lokesh before we sign off in about 3 minutes. Lokesh, this question's for you. It's been seen that during the time of crisis, leaders depend more on their type. How can we overcome this internal barrier? Since you spoke about barriers and unconscious bias.
Their type, right? Now, who says that a female cannot be their type? I don't understand that. So yes, leaders would rely on their team. That's how it is, right? A leader is as good as his team is. Let me put it like this: leader is nothing without his team. So he's as good as his team is, and there is nothing that stops a female to be like him or likewise. I mean, I know so many leaders who are first or so-called first hand to go is a female, not a man, actually. So I think it goes back to what Ankur was saying. It's not a competition. It's about the skill. It's about the style. It's about who's there for the reason of being there. So yes, in form of crisis or to get the things going, leaders definitely would want to rely on the best of class or best of team that they have. But just to be able to think, saying that best of team or the people that the leader will rely on will always be a male is more about like somebody just refraining themselves to shoot for the stars. And I don't think that's the reality in the world or in corporate. If you come across anywhere with big global teams, it's the other way around, actually.
I completely resonate with that. Thank you, Lokesh. I don't think there is a type, and the type is somebody who can get the work done for me, especially if I'm in crisis. So that's the type, and it doesn't matter what gender they represent. It doesn't matter what they're bringing. What matters is what they're delivering at that time when I need the support. There's a question that's coming again. This one is direct. I'm going to take the liberty of changing it. We have 30 seconds. So Arjun, this one's a little rapid fire for you, but on the top of your head, on an occasion, if you had to choose to give a certain direct job responsibility to a woman colleague and not a man, then what's the thought that comes to your mind? What's the first 2 things that come to your mind when you actually make that decision?
So I think I go back to what you just mentioned, that there's no type who gets things done. So if I have to choose, I just see that who can get this job done in the best way, most effective way possible. That's it. There's no gender. There's no boy, girl, no male, female. Simple answer, going back to what you have said, is that who can get things done in the most effective way possible. So.
Thank you. And what a conversation. We are on time at 7:30. And I want to recap this for our audience rather quickly. We started off by asking the question, women in leadership, is it a figurehead or is it really a reality? And what's coming to the forefront in the Forthright Conversations is it is a reality. They are in the leadership and it's slowly and steadily growing. But is it growing at the pace we would like it to grow? Probably not. What are the support system that can be brought in together to grow, make it grow at the pace that we want? It is the mindset. It is the pride in the work. It is the collective responsibility, social responsibility, and collective intelligence at the workplace. And if we put all of this together and bake this wonderful cake, we're obviously going to come up with a dish that's not known or heard of yet, but it's going to be a master creation. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And we really appreciate your time that you've spent with us. Do let us know in all earnest, how do you feel, what this conversation did to you, and what are the soft changes it brought to your thinking. Until next time, thank you for being here. Request the panelists to stay back for just 2 minutes.